Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the DSG CXG Broadbrand webinar. Today, we're going to be focusing on orchestrating customer journey with AI-driven precision. It's a topic very close to our hearts. You've got three speakers today. We've got Brandon Mazaris, he's the CEO of CXG. You've got myself, the CEO of Broadbrand, and we've got Mike Elmira, the agency head at Broadbrand, and we're going to be sharing some of our experiences with you, as well as some insights about where the industry's at, looking at customer journeys and AI integration. But I'll hand over to Brandon to do a quick introduction of DSG before we get going.
Excellent. Thanks, Vince. Welcome to everybody. I appreciate you having us joining us today. Interestingly enough, I think Digital Solutions Group, turning 27, 28 years old, we've always been at the forefront of a number of technological and specifically innovations. And I think when you look at the context of who we serve today, I think it's important to understand that a number of different clients are on different journeys. And I think for us, the conversation today couldn't be more important around particularly AI and CX. We know that as CX, large organizations, are really invested in driving those experiences, and it's simply because they know that they're going to see the upside in terms of the return on investment. Now, we're very proud of what you're seeing in terms of us as DSG, and we have a number of group companies that focus on various elements. But I think the core of today's conversation is really about sort of zoning in and driving into those experiences, whether they're marketing, sales, or service, and then effectively how AI complements those. So, that's just a quick introduction.
Perfect. Thanks, B. Cool. So you're going to see we're going to go through a couple different sections. The way we've laid out the webinar is starting sort of top of the funnel, middle, bottom of the funnel, and then the retention side, and having a look at strategies within, some case studies that go within, some tools that go within. So section one, just setting the scene, why this matters now, introductions like AI X, so how is AI and UX coming together, some of the orchestration, and then our shared mission today. So I think we all understand, I'm sure there's some CMOs on this call, and if not, if there's any marketing heads, agencies heads, I think across the industry, everybody's under pressure at the moment. Budgets are being reduced, but there's often higher expectations. We understand there's a lot more tools out there than what there was 15 years ago, a lot more platforms that we can advertise on, and understanding that the expectations often get a lot higher, the goals get a lot higher, everything that needs to happen gets a lot higher, but with less budget. So it's how do we overcome that? How do we still reach those goals that are expected from us, even though we've got less tools or less budget to work with? The next bit is, there's thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of MarTech tools and AI tools and advertising tools and creative tools, and there's a bit of a choice overload. So it's how to choose what tools fit which organization, what tools fit where in the funnel, and ensuring those tools have a goal and a purpose within that funnel, not just using tools for the sake of using tools. And then the AI hype and the usable outcome. So just making sure that anything that we put into the customer journey, anything that we put into the marketing has a goal there, and we know what the outcome for that tool is. Cool. So B, hand over to you.
So I think, today we ask why is there a competitive edge in CX? We know that those organizations that are investing in customer experiences are seeing significant return on investments. Now, in addition to those, I think when we look at it, we know that 73% of consumers expect brands to understand them. They expect them to have contextual awareness. They expect for there to be kind of what we refer to as that omni-channel investment, going, what is the optimum channel for me to communicate with an organization? And making certain that you move beyond churn. Now, for us, we know that Gartner said that 80% of customer service and support organizations will use generative AI over the next 2 to 3 years. Now, that's significant in terms of where the world of CX is. CX has traveled the journey, and that we believe by 2028 will have a significant investment, whether co-piloted, in terms of its impact on customer experiences. But we fundamentally know that CX just isn't about post-sale. We talk about the first mile, the shiny side, all the way through to the last mile. And effectively, you want to make certain you're driving those customer experiences. So for us, and when sharing some of our insights today, it's about how do we tackle some of those? What's the journey look like? And I think, Vince, you'll lead us through some of these. The interesting thing here too is when we look at AIX, it's not just about automation, it's also about orchestration. And I think the key for us is understanding the two worlds. It used to be CX, it used to previously be CRM, then customer experience management. Today it's about AIX, and really it's about AI-powered experiences that are customer-led in terms of its design. So we know that today organizations across the board are looking at smart choices around technologies, channels, and how do they bring our operating models into those? And I think for us, AIX describes that approach, focusing on the sequencing. When does a customer start their journey? What's intentional? And what are the control choices that are made? And how does AI support those journeys? We know that in the latest generation of AI tools, they will fundamentally change how customers perceive experiences, and those that are mediated through AI. That we're very aware that there's platforms that are in place that are driving context-aware, agentic, autonomous AI, and for us, the mediated customer experiences are very interesting, and it's really about finding the balance between what we call that real-time understanding of a customer's need and where a human needs to step in. We also see the world in two parts. There's that co-pilot assisted, and then there's the autonomous in terms of led execution. And for us, the AI empowering of agents, is an exceptional part of it, because we're seeing today significant work in that space. Where you have organizations who are driving CX, leaning into those co-pilots, providing assistance, providing support, whether it be through an array of LLMs, cloud platforms, and advisors. And I think for us, the autonomous side is interesting. We're going to unpack some of that a little bit later, but it really is for us is about AIX, or being in providing AI-powered experiences with customer-led design that will ultimately separate you moving forward.
And so Brandon, I think the conversation at the end of this, the Q&A, is going to be really interesting, just around what the human impact is there, and when is the right time to go, fully automated versus co-pilot mode, and so on. Yes. I think, the other side of this is that on the journey to becoming a customer or beyond that point, and while brands are busy communicating to their customers across many different channels, one of the hardest things to solve is how to present one unified, aligned voice across all the different touch points. And those have really, they've like mushroomed over the past 5 or 6 years. It used to be maybe telephone, and, someone might write a letter or something like that. And that was kind of it, right? And now there's like maybe 20 different ways in a day that one customer could talk to a brand. So as things are becoming more and more fragmented in terms of how consumers behave and what tools they use and so on, this notion of orchestration and orchestrating that customer journey in an automated way is very, very important. And so, if you look at all the big MarTech players over the past 5 or 6 years, they've all gone towards journey orchestration as sort of the heart of like an omni-channel experience, because what they've picked up on is that certainly, like, when you're operating at scale, you need to have customer 360 at the center of all of that. And, each step of the way when someone's engaging with your brand, the channel itself needs to be able to understand what the context is of, what the customer was doing before they came onto this channel, and so on. And there's a lot of personalization that happens there, right? And the other thing, we tend to, I think, as humans, oversimplify things and represent these journeys as like linear. It's a funnel. You kind of go from the left side to the right side, and it gets smaller and smaller, and you try and optimize. But the truth is that it's like spaghetti. It's like in all different directions every day, and how decisions get made around purchasing, or like what your feelings of loyalty are towards the brands that you're engaging with. These things are way more complicated than simple straight lines. And so you know, when brands treat them as straight lines,
Mm.
like there's a lot of misalignment, there's churn, there's inefficiency, and so on. And customers, just think about from a customer, like if you're a customer engaging with a brand that you know, and you get 3 different sounding kind of messages, you know, whether it's push or pull during the day, you know, your customer starts to sound schizophrenic, or the brand that you're engaging with, right? And you know that's like the silos not talking to each other inside that organization, right? So I think like where AI fits in to all of this is to sit and kind of gently optimize that whole customer journey, like on, you know, inside of the orchestration tools. And so Salesforce is AI, Oracle is AI, Adobe is AI. Everybody's integrating AI into those journeys to try and make them smoother. So yeah, so like what we've done here is we've set the foundation. We're now going to look at that funnel, and just keep in mind we're talking about a straight funnel here, but you know, like the funnel is a loop. So let's start getting into that like little bit more detail here.
Detail. Just quickly to add to that, Vince, I mean, consider this from a CMO perspective. Today, they've got over 14,000 choices in terms of platforms, AI, and we're not even just talking the big ones. So, you know, I mean, what do you do as a CMO? What are the decisions you make? And like you said, it's not a left to right. You know, there's other things that happen in between. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see how we unpack it a bit later and share some insights.
Yeah, perfect. And that's a great point, B, as well. You know, there's so many different tools that can be used, and, you know, it's deciding on what to adopt, and what do you need to use. So, you know, we often find people that are sitting with a ton of different tools, you know, all sort of doing similar things, different things, you know, pieces together, but not often talking to each other. So, you know, one of the big things we're always having to look at is, you know, you don't need to adopt everything. Just have a look within that funnel, if it's at spaghetti, if it's at certain points within the funnel, and see how it can make it more intelligent. And, you know, having a look at how to make the CX more human. So, Vince, like you said as well, you know, getting schizophrenic messages, you know, how do we make that sound like you've got a dedicated salesperson on the other side that's trying to get you to take that next conversion action? And how do we use AI to help the salespeople, help the marketing people, help whatever division it is within the company, understand where that customer's been, you know, where they currently are in the journey, you know, what do we need to push to them next, and make it sound as if they've got that dedicated, you know, single person on the other side, not a business that's just pushing out a ton of different messaging to them. So it's really having a look at marrying that strategy, technology, and then pulling in that empathy side as well, which is a big piece, you know, especially with all the tools that we have currently. It's very easy to bombard customers with 1,000 emails a day, 1,000 SMSs a day, all sort of coming from different silos within the organization. But understanding that customer is looking for some sort of value from the company. You know, I don't buy shoes for the sake of buying shoes. You know, I buy shoes because they provide me value. So how do we bring in that piece into that journey as well? And how do we get AI to help us get to that process a lot faster? And even though we've got a bowl of spaghetti that we might be working with, you know, how do we make it nice and easy for the person that's trying to sell that customer on whatever it is, understand where they are and, you know, where they need to go to next.
So Mark, while you're just resharing the deck, because I think we lost a share along the way there somewhere.
Okay.
I think it's such a good point that purchasing decisions, loyalty decisions are so like multifaceted, right? And they're impacted so much by the way that communication happens with the individual. And I think a lot of organizations tend to make a split between like sales, marketing, CX, and so on, you know. And if you just think about how those silos get structured in organizations, like that's one of the biggest pitfalls, is not having that sort of, you know, connected and operating in a sort of aligned way with unified KPIs and voice and so on.
And it feels like a lot of businesses, you know, I'm sure we've all signed up to an email list or, you know, worked with a bigger organization, and it feels like they're throwing everything in this kitchen sink over the wall at you, you know. So you start to feel, you know, that nobody actually cares about you at the organization, you know. And you're losing that empathy. You don't really want to do business. You're looking for something specific, but now, they're selling you 15, 20, 100 different products that you actually don't need. So, if we can align that process, it's very easy then to start upselling customers and offering them more and more as we know where they are, in that journey. Cool. So jumping into section 2, so the awareness and consideration side, and I think all three of us touched on this so far, especially the sort of the broken funnel, the AI and the creative strategy, and then how to implement some of that on more sort of the top of funnel side. So creating that continuity from first click, and we've spoken to this now quite a bit as well with the spaghetti. But it's really understanding, from the first click all the way until that customer converts, and then, post-purchase, if there's any follow-up, if there's any support, if there's anything going on in there, how do we ensure that there's that golden thread going throughout the funnel? With some of the clients that we deal with, there's anything from 5 to 10 to 20 different offers that have been run at the same time. The support staff at the end of the funnel needs to understand what's going on within there. So it's understanding, how do we know where that customer is on which of those funnels and which of those paths, and how do we keep that continuity going throughout and not keep jumping in with different offers? That often confuses the situation. They don't know if, this is for me, should I have a look at that rather? It's keeping that awareness and that consideration going throughout. And because of that broken funnel, that's often where the CX handle fails as well. Once they get to a sales call, once they start calling into the company, because now they're confused because they've got everything thrown at them, the sales staff don't actually know what the customer has seen, what part of the journey that they're in. So it's almost like you're starting from scratch again, and you feel like a stranger to company, you may have been dealing with for years, or even very recently. I suppose it works both ways as well. If I've just clicked on an ad, even coming to this webinar, for instance, and now all of a sudden I'm getting 50 different offers from DSG, I'm going to feel like a stranger to them. That's not what I wanted from the business. That's not what I'm looking for. So, making sure that the CX, the sales staff, the marketing teams, everybody within the business has that alignment, understands where those customer journeys are, and often mapping those out makes a huge difference as well. Being able to actually visualize what that journey looks like. It's, putting down maps of what it looks like. And, if the customer entered here, these are the possible points they could be at until I get onto a call with them. It's not just we're running these 20 campaigns. The sales staff know that these campaigns are running, but have no idea what marketing's happening in between that, what videos are being produced, what channels the customers are coming from. So ensuring that, there's that continuity throughout. And, even if it's just putting down a map to understand that and using AI to bring that all together at the end of the day.
Interestingly enough, Mike, just to add to that, just think about this. If you've got this disjointed experience, and you haven't solved for that, and you now add AI to the mix, I think you're just going to exacerbate the challenge. I mean, just by way of, because you haven't solved the core of what it is that you're managing. So if you throw AI into the mix, into that dysfunction, you're adding to it. So you'll exacerbate the customer experience rather than what it's intended to do. Anyway, just something that we've picked up from our experience already.
You're so right, Brandon. And I think, generally the thing that you think about, like right at the top of the funnel, is going to be sort of in your advertising space there, where you're busy doing awareness, consideration type advertising, or perhaps further down the funnel, you're doing performance advertising. One of the areas that we've really found, like on talking very practically here, that have helped impact those funnels as a whole, is to use AI to enhance the creative production process. So like if you just think about what the sort of process is, where, a company is briefing in their top line agency, that's kind of going to the digital agency to get cut into banners, and then that goes to the media buying agency to purchase and run, purchase media and run those campaigns. Well, it's quite a long and tedious process that's very prone to error. A lot of it's very email based and so on. But all of that entire process is really focused on deciding, for example, what ad impression to buy. And then like when you look at what's gone into the creative, like a very common complaint that we get from clients is that they feel like there's not enough creative variation, there's not enough volume of creative, and because that whole industry is locked into sort of a time and materials model where if you want like a couple of thousand ad creatives, it's going to take you like 6 months and cost you, you know, a significant amount to get all of that done. Just to have a ad campaign where you can do really high quality like split testing and multivariate testing on those ad creatives. So like just practically, and we've got a case study later, like we use a platform, one of our partners called Newsroom AI. And what it does is it really helps us to scale out creative very, very quickly. So it's not necessarily generating original creative, but it's creating variants that can then be used for testing. And so this has got us to the point where, like with one of our customers, we took a 90-day process and compressed it into 14 seconds. So, you know, that kind of thing, like the impact that has is that those teams can then focus on performance improvement, on creating different sort of refreshes and updates of that creative, can spend more time thinking about what the marketing job is that they're trying to do, rather than just like chasing deadlines, where a lot of people are doing a lot of like manual work. So, you know, the creative, you know, and we'll show a case study later of how this really worked for one of our clients. But if you're getting creativity that's landing with empathy and intent, then you start to get something that's working really, really well. So let's go to the
Vince,
next slide, Mike.
Yeah, Vince, I mean, just to add to that, I mean, if you look at the empathy, yeah, I think just onto the next slide, you know, we know that, you know, we speak about building that empathy and make sure that you build it really, but also understand that some organizations build products, bots, etc., to try and manage some of the engagement. But in our world, we know that not all bots are created equal. And for us, that first impression matters, tone, the formats, the timing, you know, and you look at the use, and again, just the practical exercise, you know, we've managed the journey, particularly with one of our clients where, you know, we've looked at the channel optimization, and we talk about what does it mean and what is the optimal channel for WhatsApp? What does it make sense for? What is the utilization of the channel for in the support journey? And it might be that I'm in a particular cycle and I have questions. I'm unsure of the offer or whatever it is. But also you talk about that empathy when I've gone through a journey, but something needs to be corrected, fixed. And, you know, we know that with one of our clients, you know, we've walked a journey with them where over a 3-month transformation period, you know, you're managing 1.5 million conversations. And you automate 72% of those, but you haven't lost the empathy, because the simple reality here is that you then say, well, hold on a second. If you still need support beyond the key questions you have, you know, we're here to support you. And that's the empathy part. And we know that, you know, if then sort of bots don't work anymore, there's a very integrated experience that's offered. And, you know, there's many case studies that speak to where it's done right. And I think, when you look, that's just at WhatsApp as a channel, and the same for web chat, building that as an option to make sure that there is a path to somebody when there is something a little more complex that needs to be managed. You know, sometimes there might be a scenario where, you know, you're dealing with a particular segment and or audience or a customer where, you know, they just need a particular set of work completed. Something didn't work in their journey, purchase journey side, and they go, I just want a refund. And sometimes some of those become quite complex, and that's where you build in the empathy, but also the ability to speak to somebody when some of these things happen.
Yeah.
Brandon, also, so just practically, it's been very difficult for rule-based bots to understand language, to know, to try and figure out how someone's feeling while they're communicating with you, you know. And I think like now AI has got us to that point where
absolutely
you can tell the difference between someone who's mildly annoyed versus extremely annoyed, you know, versus feeling quite like a super fan.
Yeah, that sentiment we're picking up is becoming a key driver, Vince, in terms of that empathy. And we're even seeing that AI kind of populating across most of the channels, going, here's what we're seeing in terms of the sentiment. And it used to be kind of reserved for the social space, but these days it's across all of those channels. So we find that sentiment is key in terms of those conversations, and you can track real-time conversations. So you go, hold on a second, I see there's an issue here, let's intervene. And I think will probably become an interesting space, particularly. But yeah, agreed.
Yep. What I find quite interesting what you both just said now, Vince, you're obviously talking a lot more to the top of the funnel, Brandon talking a lot more to the bottom of the funnel, but in both of you, what you've said is, using AI to open up and free up teams' time. So you're not necessarily chasing deadlines. You don't have, 1.5 million conversations that you need to go through, or you've got thousands of creatives that you need to produce. So, it gives the teams a lot more time to actually look at that empathy side, to actually build out those journeys a lot more in depth and actually work together with the teams. You're not sitting there, you've got 6 months to produce tens of thousands of creatives. I've got no time to go talk to the sales team, or, you've got millions of conversations that you need to get through. So, I don't have time to go and talk to other teams and to have a look at the journeys necessarily. Where what's amazing about AI now is it can free up a lot of that time. It can do a lot of that sort of legwork that needs to be done with it. And it gives you a lot more time to focus on the actual customer, which is, who's going to purchase from you at the end of the day. And, people don't necessarily buy with logic, they're buying with emotion. So it gives us a lot more time to build in, like you said, be that empathy side or that emotional connection, and actually understand what your customer is going through. And then both teams work together to know where they are in that journey and build out proper flows to increase that conversion rate going down the funnel.
Yeah. So, I was speaking about how we've been deploying AI for creatives specifically. So the way that the system works, just maybe to talk through like the process really. You would take a set of creative, and I think Claire was asking this question around what the difference is between, is there a big difference between fully creative generated content or creative from AI versus assisted? And like the model that we take is kind of a blended one, because AI is just not reliable enough at this point to do the entire job end to end. Although it's so much further this year than it was last year versus the year before. So like the speed at which it's getting uncannily human is incredible, but we're not there yet. So, and what this system does is we'll take pre-approved creative. So for example, a creative agency may have produced like 1 or 2 like banners. We would then take those, feed the pre-approved creative into the system that then builds variants. So it's like experimenting with different wording, different call to action text, different templates for the visuals and things like that. And it produces a couple of thousand of these variants. And then because it's a piece of ad serving tech, it basically builds out a performance ranking for each of those creatives. That's not across the entire programmatic ecosystem. It's down to each individual ad unit slot on a publisher, and then zeroes in on the best performing ones and boosts those. So like the impact has been like completely like mind-blowing, basically, in terms of like just what optimization down on that ad serving level can actually get you. And so the net impact is like there's much less waste, the marketing ROI is up, the impact is massive. And that just creates more opportunities really for like a connection around your, and making that first impression with potential customers, right? So, and then once you've done that, like we get into the sort of period where you have to start building and maintaining trust and awareness.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that goes into a lot of the, like it says, the proactive engagement, not just reactive as well. So, as much as it is using AI at the top of the funnel to produce a lot of the creatives, it's also having a look further down the funnel at where the customers are what points in the journey there are, and using AI to qualify those customers. So, it's not just using tools to capture information or using tools to get the best click-through rates, but be proactive with any offers that are going to go out, smart forms that are going to go out. If customers have filled out the information before, how can we use that information and pull it through across the board as well? So, we want to try be as proactive as we can across all journeys, and it's very difficult to do, without something in the background that's running, having a look at every customer that's going through your journeys, landing on your websites, possibly filling out your forms, taking up your products, whatever it might be. So, unless you've got a massive team that can watch, heat maps of every customer running through everything, that's where a lot of these tools can come in as well, and figure out, not just testing offers at certain times, but understanding if a customer's at this point, what's the best offer to give them at that point. And that's really where we're going to see the better conversion rates coming through as well, and testing those offers against each other as well.
So this is the
Mike,
case study that I was talking
yeah,
about. But
yeah.
go for it, Brandon.
No. I just wanted to add, I mean, that orchestration and around awareness is key. But yeah, I mean, I've got a point a little bit later. I think go for this, Vince. This is a little more interesting, huh?
Yeah, so this was something we did with Jungle Oats. So we deployed Newsroom AI. We created some top of the funnel brand stories, which are rich media ads. And then we used the AI co-pilot to then extend the sort of key visual elements of those brand stories into thousands of different iterations. And the interesting thing about all of this is that the process end to end, the creative process, took like a couple of days, not even really to get it, and then to full deployment at scale within 72 hours. And this was like working with the creative agency's folder and files, working with the media buying agency to do the media buying and so on, and sort of joining the dots there, and then using AI to deploy this thing out at scale. And the sort of big impact, and I've been saying the way that these things, although they sometimes seem subtle, have massive marketing ROI impact, is that they got a 16 times higher click-through rate on this campaign than anything else that they've done before. So that's just more and more opportunities for them to then connect and engage with customers or potential customers. And so, like if you take this kind of tech and you start combining it with experience-led messaging, you get a really interesting and winning combination.
Yeah. Can I say, I mean, on this campaign as well, when we're working on this campaign, Jungle Oats necessarily is not the most exciting product to work on in the world. Everybody sort of knows Jungle Oats. There's not a huge amount to it, but what was fun on this campaign, and compared to what a lot of other campaigns we run before, is that at the bottom there you can see the 72 hours to deploy at scale, where 5 years ago to deploy at scale would have taken us a couple of weeks, possibly a couple of months to run all those ad variations, where that came down to 3 days. So it opened up a huge amount of time for the team to actually have fun with the ads, to try out different types of ads, try out different types of rich media, to play around with animating still images, to really get into the creative side of the campaign, and not have that sort of worry in the background that this is gonna, we're under time deadlines and we've got a huge amount of creative that we need to push out. So we can have a lot more fun and be a lot more creative on the front side, knowing that we've got these sort of platforms that can launch all of our ads at scale. And I think that also contributed a lot to that higher click-through rate, is taking something that's boring, that usually we've got a very short amount of time to put the creative together, to open up a huge amount of time for us to have fun with the ads and not be worried about actually having to launch, thousands of variations.
Interesting, Mike, and I think Vince, when you look at the orchestration side, we know that the insights are only as powerful. There's that kind of as the symphony you conduct. So for us, awareness without orchestration is like, we view it as noise. And why do we say that? I mean, understand that the the awareness needs that orchestration, because the simple reality of it is that it won't, data alone won't move an audience. None of those elements that are just are kind of very flat in its approach in terms of data and numbers. But when you look at it in a well-conducted awareness strategy, assists you in terms of your automation. So here's some practicality to it. Automation, both slightly further down in the funnel, where you're managing an engagement that's as a result of what for example, what you've shared, where there's a set of engagement, there's a set of participation, making sure that you're still automating, but it helps you amplify what we refer to as the empathy. So again, in our world, we know that automation can drive and enhance your empathy, because what you do is you kind of make certain that your journeys are set up in such a way that it's orchestrated, that you go, well, I'm mindful of your time, therefore let me automate this piece so that you don't have to go through lengthy processes. And we know that AI helps connect the customer, and the creative and the customer. And again, it's in the scenario of that jungle, it's not necessarily about what you produce, but it's about how it's arranged to resonate with who you're speaking to.
Yep. Perfect. Okay, so yeah, jumping into the next section, the conversion of purchase. So looking further down the funnel now, just closing that gap to cart, and everything down to metrics that actually matter. So, forgetting some of the high level metrics that often look good on reports, but things that actually matter, and how do we get that customer to take that last step that we need them to take in that journey?
Yeah, so Mike, if I had a rant for every broken handoff between marketing and CX, like I wouldn't be on this webinar, right? But it's like such a common thing. And again, it's like, probably one of the biggest challenges I think corporates face with rolling out journey orchestration is the change management and the skills management and the skills migration, when it comes to like bringing in new technologies, is so difficult because those silos have operated independently for so long, so connecting that is really important, and it takes leadership that have a very focused vision and commitment on a budget level, a time level, a strategy level, to make sure that these things happen, right? And I mean, you see sort of the side effects of this, where there's just like a ton of cart abandonment, or there's a ton of people sort of making a single purchase and never purchasing again, etc. Landing flows that, kind of the marketing team would say potentially that like their job's done once they've dropped someone onto that landing page, at the beginning of that conversion journey, when the reality is like their job's not done until that customer stops being a customer, and even then they've got win back responsibilities as well. So it's just like, it's about instilling a sense of total ownership, I think, across the entire customer journey. But then, when you start getting this right, and you realize that humans can only write as many rules as they can think of, and what really makes AI so impactful, I think, is that I don't think we realize even how many gaps we create by creating rule-based systems, and AI gets to go on a much finer level of detail and make smaller segments with more personalized messaging and so on. And you start having this sort of invisible CX where you can potentially start anticipating challenges and preempting them before they even happen, and that sort of removes friction quite a lot, right? So let's maybe, like, Brandon, why don't you talk us through a little bit about the tech side of this customer transition that we're going through?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Vince, if you look at it from a perspective of the technology that's sitting behind it, not only do we see friction being a key focal point, so how do you remove the friction? And you spoke about that invisible CX, but the other parts of those journeys is saying, when you look at those handoffs, making sure that you're clear on what it is that we're looking to achieve here. There's, often or not, sometimes, and you mentioned it, the handoff is broken. I'm not too sure what it is that's actually happening. What am I actually selling? What am I actually referring to? So a lot of those happen. But also for us, when you look at the tech side, I think and you know, it's kind of, Vince, I kind of liken it to making sure that these days your technology is infused with AI so that it enhances your support, it enhances the delivery. It's an integrated experience. And for us, we know that those are also whilst you know you're dealing with a level of automation that AI is infused in, you also then have those supported journeys where you talk about communication AI, where it taps into your knowledge base, your FAQs. It's contextual in its responses in the way that it manages the engagement. So the technology is a key driver when we talk to CX, because not only must it contend with a significant number of channels, of touch points, it must also contend with the ability for you to, that when you're engaged, to deliver the right set of content at the right time, whether it be through a particular cycle, whether it be through a win back or other.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, that tech, Mike, you're going to talk now about landing page personalization, right? I mean, it just goes across the entire funnel, like the impact of the changes in the tech.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, what we often see, or sort of what's been the standard practice, is you'll produce your set of ads with your colors and your copy and the call to actions that will go along with it, the landing pages, upsell pages, your carts, all the way down to the conversion at the end of the day. But a whole new world's been opened up, and been able to change certain elements of the page. Has always been there, that you can connect, ads, depending on the geography of where that ad's being placed or whatever the headline is, to have that continuity come through onto the landing page. But, with AI now, that opens up, 1,000 different doors on how we can place these together. And, everything from the content changing, call to actions, colors, any element basically within your journey can be adapted real time now, and using the systems in the background to understand those customers and actually start bringing that golden thread throughout the funnel as well. So, understanding that the customer's seeing the red ad with this sort of copy, they're in this sort of geography, and then bringing that onto the landing pages, bringing that further and further down the funnel. So it's not necessarily having to run 10 different styles of campaigns, and then manually have to go through each one, watch the heat maps, look at the analytics, and then start deciding which one's best. But being able to run, one funnel that can adapt automatically depending on how users are engaging with that funnel. And it amplifies that A/B testing as well. So, if we run in hundreds of creatives, it's a lot of man hours that go into
Do we just lose Mike?
Yeah, I thought it was maybe me, Vince.
No, Mike's disappeared, but we were saying there are a lot of man hours, which is a good point.
Yeah.
Let's see if we get him back.
Yeah. Let me quickly.
Maybe let's do some Q&A while we're waiting for Mike to reconnect. I think so there was a question in the chat, just Ian, I'm really interested in your point of view on this, because you by far the largest staff complement across the group. It's just, how do you manage this balance between rolling out AI, impacting people's employment? What's the sort of path that you would suggest for someone, for example, who works in a contact center, on how to become like AI proof in their career?
That's a great question. There's kind of two sides to it. The one, you get the one side of, and some of the sort of opinions are it's going to replace everything.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to be jobless. And I think the simple reality of it is that I don't think so. I think what it'll do is we're seeing AI being infused. And I kind of mentioned it a bit earlier, where you work alongside, kind of similar to the co-pilot, where you will manage things it will kind of real-time manage a conversation or hear you, and regardless of which channel, and go, hold on a second, Brandon, he has a suggestion as part of the conversation. But taking it one level up, when you look at it at a broader context, we're seeing what we call the workforce change. And in our world, it's there we go, Mike is back. It's about agents that are working, or teams that are working from a CX perspective, and you then have what we call digital conversational AI that's kind of complementing the journey, and it kind of works both internally and externally from a customer and from their perspective. So to answer you, it's become more of a balance and a hybrid rather than it's going to replace all and forget about it. It's actually meant to assist with kind of creation of, or rather it alleviates some of the, some of the mundane stuff, and rather let agents focus on being focused on what they're communicating.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll also just share a conversation that I had with my team when I was at MultiChoice, which was about a year and a half ago. I really think as leadership in organizations, it's your responsibility to do your level best for your staff to help them to manage this, because it is a very big, very strong disruption that's coming, right? And if you're callous in your management style and the way that you deal with people who are struggling to adopt because it's just so intimidating and they're frightened of it. So now, everyone's saying they're going to lose their job. You've got to try and create different ways to connect them to this technology. It's a kind of a responsibility and a burden that we all have now because of how rapidly things are going to change. Otherwise, it's going to be devastating, and so I think just like, again, we keep talking about empathy at every single slide almost, right? But it's the most important thing that you can have in a situation like that.
But just to quickly add to it, and I agree with you, we're also seeing a number of initiatives, particularly, I mean, in South Africa, the BPO sector is an interesting one. It employs hundreds of thousands. In fact, it's quite a contributor to the GDP for South Africa. Anyway, I guess the key for us is saying, how do we make certain that we're tapping into that same talent pool? And part of that is we're seeing a significant amount of investment in AI universities. So how do I, like it, same to that MultiChoice example, how do I tap into one of these AI universities? How do I learn, what does it mean to become a prompt engineer? What does it mean when you speak AI? What does it mean when you talk to Copilot? It's not something to be afraid of. So that we're seeing a number of those initiatives where we're saying, let's align for the next iteration of workforce, because only those that have knowledge can participate. So let's enable that, because we have a massive workforce and they're young. So
now that we've got Mike back, and Mike was sideways for a while, but now he's straight. Let's just talk a little bit about like what high intent targeting can do, right? So I mean, obviously in the MarTech side, it's a scale industry. There are a lot of inefficiencies inside there. But if you sort of get these things deployed in a way that starts to really work, you're going to have campaigns that are performing better than doing retargeting in that old rules-based way of doing it. And it allows you then to start doing like real-time budget allocation. And so like one of the best examples that I've seen of this are when Domino's plus Twilio Segment partnered to build out campaigns that were really personalized. And, the thing that we've been kind of not mentioning through all of this is what the role of the CDP is in the MarTech stack and so on, and how it connects all the dots, right? And I think a lot of people have zeroed in on Customer 360 needs to be something that sits in a data lake. The problem with the data lake is you can't activate that data in real time in the marketing ecosystem. So it's great for generating insights. It's great for, doing predictive stuff, but it's really difficult to connect into like real-time bidding. So CDPs sort of by their sort of DNA are that thing, and that's where you should really have all your kind of Customer 360 data sitting there at the marketing edge so that it can be activated. So Domino's did this, and I just want to say, like, Domino's is a massive organization and they've been operating at scale forever, right? They sell a lot of pizza, these guys, but for them to then drop their cost per acquisition by 65% is one of like it's a huge impact and it just goes to show how much more room there is to build efficiency in this space going forward. So just Google Domino's Pizza Twilio Segment case study. There's a whole long story about how they did this and why it's not even all AI. It's often just building around individual, like kind of smaller segmentation of behavior and so on. So maybe let's get into an area that like is Brandon's passion, right? Support and CX journeys.
Yeah. Vince, I think just to share with our audience, we know that 24/7 engagement is a thing, and realistically, it's expensive when you have people and teams that and also working through nights, all of these things. So one of the things that we are quite proud of is the ability for us to manage that 24/7 chat, whether it be with a bot, whether it be with a conversational AI assistant in terms of I need help. And part of that journey for us that's important is when you talk about that level of support is making certain that it's conversational based. So, whether and there's a few practical examples that we can share, but, one of them is, where you deal with a scenario where I have questions. Who do I speak to? I have potentially I've made a purchase and I need to ask key questions, and you kind of engage what we call a conversational AI assistant bot, and really you manage a natural conversation with them around what I've experienced. I placed an order, happened 30 minutes ago. It's contextually aware and understands what you're saying to you, what you're sharing as a customer. The second part, when you talk to that checking out and you're in the process of the human, where there's that real-time cart assist via bots. For many, many years, we started out as an e-commerce organization 27, 28 years ago, digitalmall.com. We had created something called Hannah. Hannah was like a virtual assistant back then. Now imagine 1998, you have this virtual assistant and people thought, hold on a second, we're a little bit crazy. Today, that's kind of standard, right? You have these assistants. But interestingly enough, today, in terms of real-time cart assists, what happens if there's a drop cart and you need to be able to kind of go, hold on, how about we make a bot pick that up, give you a call and have a conversation with you. Say, hey, Vince, I've realized that Mike, we seem to have missed you here. Is there anything we can help with? And that's the difference, and assist you with that conversion. So again, when that happens, you then do what we call the handoff back to say, right, it's over to you now. You handle the payment. That's part of the trust that we have with you, that you'll complete the transaction. So there's many ways to manage that seamless checkout process. Not only, and that's if you look at it from a perspective of where you're offering something that's purchasable 24/7, 365, and you want to have that support. There's many other citable examples where today it's beyond just checkout. It's part and parcel of a journey. So, I may have a policy, I signed up an insurance policy. I have an accident, and you kind of want to speak to somebody because it's something that you need to find out or engage with now. We see those today. Conversational AI, it's part of the journey. It's part of the experience. First notification of loss, I call in, it's contextually aware, it understands sentiment, it understands you're frustrated, and we'll go, hold on a second. We've got everything we need. Somebody will chat with you, and it then hands off to somebody to say, right, this is an emergency. So there's many different examples of where it could be used in various scenarios.
Yeah.
Cool.
And that's, again, bringing it all the way down. So, from all the way on the personalized ads at the top of the funnel, the actual places that they're going to do the conversions, and down to the AI assisted checkouts as well. So there was a study from Baynard, which I thought was quite relevant for this as well, where, again, just checkout UX improvements got them a 35% increase in conversion rates, which is massive. So, we're often focused on the top of the funnel, the landing pages, getting someone to that actual conversion step, and then often leaving that as is, coming with whatever the standard template is or whatever, sort of came with the platform that you're using. But having a look at that step as well can have a huge impact on how many people are actually converting. And, the AI assist, like you've just said, Brandon, as well, having someone that can be there to help you 24/7, or, if you're struggling with something, I was often think of, e-commerce trading where you just put in your payment details. But if you're taking up insurance, like you said, that can be quite a complicated process. And if, you might not be doing that at 2 a.m. in the morning, but, there might be some people that are doing that in the middle of the night, and having someone there to answer those questions, or a bot there or something that's AI assisted to help you get through those questions, possibly as something you haven't purchased before, can have a huge impact on those conversion rates down the line, and as well as just the UX that goes along with it. So, being able to ensure that what the customer's seen at the top of the funnel all the way to that actual cart checkout, there's that golden thread that's being pulled through. I know I do mention it a lot, but it makes a huge difference understanding what they've seen before what do I need to tell them next to take that next step? What information have they seen? What have they engaged with as well? What resonated with them? It's a lot of campaigns we're putting out, 5, 10, 20 different types of messaging, each talking to a specific hurdle or a specific benefit of the product, and which one has resonated with that customer, and then bringing that into, the cart or the conversion page if it's filling out a form or whatever it might be, going down the line. And it's also understanding then what that success looks like at the end of the day. So to build out those funnels, you need to understand what the goals are at the end of the day and what you're trying to get customers to achieve at the end of the day. And I think, Vince, this is your wheelhouse, more than anybody on this call.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line here is that connecting everything, like all these dots, takes a lot of work. And there are going to be parts that are really difficult, right? But I mean, in Brandon's world, like first contact resolution is so important. Time to value is very, very important. Cart to checkout, so important. Things like, for example, people dropping off on a payment journey because you're taking them outside of your environment, really difficult as well. And then, other things, for example, like being able to use AI to do like real-time CSAT scoring, which is something that Brandon's team do all the time as part of their technology stack, is really, really powerful, because that real-time feedback is going to really help accelerate, right? So I think, and all of this comes down to, if you're a marketing leader or a CX leader, you've got to be making exco presentations, and you've got to be able to justify like why you're asking for large amounts of money to put down technology, infrastructure, new processes, hopefully like ways to educate people on your team, change management, and so on. So let's just talk about like what the board should be caring about, in this environment.
When I think two things. The first is when you talk about those customer acquisition costs and the conversion velocity, we know that there's kind of two ways to view it when you put them together. And really it's about saying, well, if you have a low customer acquisition cost and a high velocity, it means you're acquiring customers efficiently and cost effectively and at pace or scale. And then the opposite is true. So I think, what boards are looking for is saying, what are we looking for? We're looking for those conversions. Why? Because it simply means that there's a quicker realization of your revenue in terms of velocity. And I think the key for us is making sure that, at a board level, you're able to report on it, to go, this is what we see, this is the level of investment. And remember that AI supports those. Vince, you touched on it. How do you make sure that at a funnel at some point, you're spending a certain amount of money around customer acquisition? You've touched on a lot of it in terms of AI and simply, kind of driving all of it. But what does it mean at the end of the day? You need to be able to justify, to say, well, the acquisition cost and the conversion velocity, whether low or high, these are the impacts. Because the reality of it is that you probably need AI to assist you in going, hold on, you need to change here. You need to be dynamic in your approach, rather than, well, I've committed to the end. And I think that's what AI gives you.
We're close to the end now, actually, and we're on
true.
an hour, so we're going to have to start flying through the last little bit here. Mike, do you want to speak a little bit about conversion?
Yeah, so let's jump into some of the takeaways that we've been speaking about. So, conversion isn't just the design, but it's the data that comes along with it. So if that's understanding your customer, understanding where they are in the journey, understanding at what point you need to give them what offer, and ensuring that within that you bring in the trust as well. So, we are at the end of the day still selling to people, or getting people to take up an offer or service or whatever it might be. And the trust is a big lever within that. As always, people are buying with emotion, and they're looking for that empathy when they're going through that buying journey. They going to pay for it, they're expecting something to come out of it, and expect you to understand who they are, even if they understand, if you're a Discovery Bank, you're selling to 10,000 people. I think if any of us, chat to chat to the service agents there, we still expect them to understand who we are, which seems, you know, a bit unreasonable, but I think that's how most people think. So, you know, it's making sure that that trust can come through, and how do you bring that data, you know, to a workable place that whoever's dealing with that client or whatever funnel that's going into, how can that be implemented in an effective way? And, you know, understanding that AI is the support, you know, it's not going to sell your products for you. You know, there's possibly use cases that you can use AI to, you know, sell certain funnels, but, you know, if it's going to become a long-term sustainable funnel, whatever it might be, you know, you still need the people to convert at the end of the day. So, you know, that emotional connection, that trust, that can't be replaced by AI, but it's how do we get AI to help us build that into the funnels more effectively and understand our customers a lot more effectively. And then, yeah, the last section we're just jumping into is the retention and advocacy. So, you know, just having a look at keeping it human, the loyalty paths, and how to increase that ROI and the lifetime value of customers after they've made that purchase with you. So, I know this is,
Yeah. So let me quickly just
your strong side.
Yeah, I mean, you know, retention is key. I think we understand that once I've won your heart, your mind, you know, it's a matter of making certain that, you know, I continue to look after and value your lifetime value. You know, we talk about LTV. You know, we know for us that's the key, and protecting wallet share. Now, you know, CX is key to earning loyalty. There's a number of studies, there's broad-based studies that talk about, and very focused ones too, that really kind of share with you the impact on your profit, your revenue, just by making certain that you retain it. And, you know, practical example, and I'll rifle through this. You know, we do quite a lot of work for a fairly large organization in terms of the retention side, but you know, as part of the retention, we also then go into what we call a selling journey, because there is loyalty. There's loyalty to that brand. There's a mind from the heart, and we manage a sell process as part of that. So again, you wouldn't be in a position to do that unless you retained well and then moved into what you talk about as that loyalty. So being able to expand the relationship, so that it's the widening of that wallet share, and again, protecting that lifetime value. So I just want to keep it short because I know we time is done. So we.
Yeah. And, you know, post-purchase journeys are like another area where AI could play a really big role. You know, like we've spoken a little bit about rule-based retargeting models. I think we've all been followed by like that ad for the dishwasher or whatever at some point in our lives, and it kind of goes wherever you go. Super annoying. I think, you know, when you get into like a full orchestration mode, and you can start personalizing all your outbound channels as well, and integrating sort of retargeting, contextually relevant messaging into things like that. So, you know, I've been on project teams where we would have journeys that kind of go over 90 days, for example, because they're all sort of like, what's nice about these things is that they're often quite like time-based. And so, you know, there'd be dynamic elements in the comms which are responsive to like what the last thing was that you were doing on the platform, for example. You know, so that just like deepens the sort of richness and relevance, I think, and generally is going to give you a lot more like resonance with that messaging that you're putting out there. And so, you know, like I think to an extent, like a lot of the orchestrations that I've seen are more focused on, you know, new customers, and they're like the welcome journeys, that sort of stuff, and cross-sell journeys. But definitely like all your sort of post-sale behavior, especially if this is like a SaaS, for example, that we're talking about, where it's not just like you buy the product and you have it, but like rather something that you're going to be using all the time. And there are signals around when are you starting to, you know, like if your usage patterns start dropping off, for example, you could start building up like certain predictive models around, is that actually a sign of churn to come or not? So Yeah, and it's not just about tech, right? Like people don't always just stay because like you're good at communicating. It's like the overall experience that's really important.
Yeah. Just to add on to that quickly, when I was working with one of the garden nursery brands with e-commerce side, what we would do often is have a look at what people had bought. And we had quite a significant blog base from everything from, planting our pots to caring for specific plants to, whatever it is, and having a look at what they've purchased in the cart and then offering up that value on those articles going back to it. So, if they've bought lawn dressing with seeds or sod or whatever it might be, then offering them up that value that goes, how to plant the sod correctly, or, what fertilizers to use or whatever it might be. And within each of the articles as well, there's links back to the product. So it's increasing that value. They understand, okay, I've planted my sod, I need X, Y, and Z fertilizer that's within the article, and then they come back and then actually purchase that. So we saw quite a nice increase in lifetime value once we started linking the two together.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, and Vince, just a quick one. I think just when we speak to AI and people, we're seeing more and more what we refer to as a hybrid infused approach. And it's interestingly enough, where you talk to AI and people, as stronger relationships, absolutely. We're seeing organizations internally leveraging the ability to engage because you want to provide a far superior experience. So you would have a bot type of scenario where you can kind of ask questions, it'll support you in a process. And that's internally, from that internal external view as an employee. And I think when you talk about the human escalation, we know that it must feel natural. And the reality is kind of when you're engaged, particularly that insurance example I gave you, when you're kind of going through this journey, you want to make certain that if you're unable to hear me, we pick up that the sentiment is moving into what I call that red hot flamey stuff. You kind of go, hold on a second. Actually, it's time that you speak to one of our team or our 6 team members, because the simple reality is that it's kind of, you've reached that level in that conversation where it's not working for that particular customer or consumer. WhatsApp support is significant these days. We know that it's a very prevalent channel. And we've, again, where you infuse it with AI, the ability to manage conversations, engage up and down, provide API integrated approaches. It really does provide a level of support that's beyond kind of where you'd have to phone and manage a particular process. Although voice fallback is there, always is, I think it'll remain that challenge. The simple reality is we find there's that crossing of channels where sometimes you start on one and you land on another, and today organizations need to be comfortable managing those. No matter if you're on a site, you're going through a purchase journey, you then call, then you jump into the bot. It doesn't make a difference. The reality is the single customer view is key. That's AI supported, that drives those relationships.
Yeah. And to add on to that as well, where you say having a single view, of that customer, and that's a great place for the AI to come in and actually score those customers. So, we're looking at a lot of the support side, but a little slightly further up the funnel, if we've got that single view of that customer, we understand all their data, it's not siloed into a whole bunch of different places. We can see everything they've done throughout the business. If it's something, like an insurance product or one of the banks, you might have products within a whole bunch of different business or units within the business, being able to understand all of that within one place and then be able to score those customers. So, bringing the gamification side into it, this is something that Discovery obviously does very well, bringing that gamification side into it. And I think that's also why they've done so well across the board. So, not pushing out generic offers to customers. I think that's the big one as well. So again, going back to that trust and that empathy to, you wanting the business to understand who you are, where you are, what are your needs, what are the hurdles that you're facing, and then be able to offer you stuff that's going to help you overcome those hurdles, or offer you specific products that are suited to what you need as well. And the gamification side just, helps increase that re-engagement that goes into it as well. But I think, with all of this, it's also helping to try and prevent that churn before it happens. So being able to see where that customer is in that journey, and be able to predict if there's, any signs that customer is gonna drop off. And I think you obviously see quite a bit with the predictive support side.
Absolutely. It's an interesting space that we're playing, and particularly here where you talk about the proactive support. Where you start picking up trends, you start understanding what's happening from a consumer perspective. And we often are not drive what we call AI triggers. I think Vince touched on a bit earlier around CSAT, and we also do what we call an AI measured CX impact. And really what that's about is understanding the customer experience impact. And there's kind of two formats to it. One is what we call the long-term view, which is saying, what is it in that particular customer experience journey that didn't work? And then the secondary portion is the very short term in terms of that CX impact, where we see that experience, there's an immediate re-engagement. And really that's about ensuring that you're continuously winning back, that you're continuously rescuing. And there's two folds to it. There's a one of those where it's kind of, there's the standard, what I call the standard driven approach, CSAT, give you a call, apologies, etc. The second, in terms of what we're seeing, is the ability to leverage conversational AI to kind of collect a bit more information as part of that journey. So it really depends on how you apply it. Most of the time, it's the empathetic view that wins. We've seen the other where kind of a conversational bot tries. The simple reality is that Brandon or Mike wants to get that call to say it didn't work, and you kind of manage that as a proactive approach. And we do that through our informed CX impact key driver as part of what we do on our end.
Are you going to tell us a little bit about agent thoughts as well as part of this, or?
Yeah. Let me quickly touch on it. I think in the world of when you talk about resolution, understand that when we talk Salesforce as Agentforce resolves 80% of customers, 83% of their queries without human touch. Now, we've also seen so that's the good side. The other is how does it do it? It leverages a knowledge base. It kind of manages some of that mundane drive, kind of in customer, what we call customer key drivers. The other part of that though is that the interesting part is that as long as it's very clear on what its mandate is, and I often refer to it as the supported view. So is it a particular set of journeys that need support? Those then work really well. We've also seen hallucinations and all kinds of other things in the market where it doesn't work well, and you've seen a revert back. So there's always that side of the world. There's a kind of a very interesting support study that's just happened recently. But we know if it's managed well, you can reduce that reliance on people, but you still have a contingent of people that are there that if there is something that needs to be managed that is not necessarily mundane, it's complex, there's emotion contained to it, you still have a human set of support available.
Yeah. So what are you going to track, right? The KPIs with all of this tech, right? Like how do you track emotion, sentiment, agent empathy, all of this stuff? And these new KPIs, I guess, are like filtering into everybody's worlds at the moment, right? And what I'm seeing a lot of is like this, you'll have teams in organizations that are pushing forward really hard on AI, for example, and have a lot of KPIs, and the world of measurement there hasn't standardized to the point where it's all, consistent. So there's that battle on the one hand, and then on the other hand, you've got this battle where, if one team's pushing forward with AI and another isn't, you end up with this sort of asymmetrical situation in organizations where, like people are no longer talking the same language about customers, right? And I think this is where like this exco level strategic leadership in organizations needs to come in. Like the AI agenda almost has to be driven by by the CEO down in order to make sure that you've got uniform KPIs across the board.
And that's again where those trigger referrals start to come in as well. So understanding how that customer feels, and bringing up the advocacy that comes with it as well. And it's not reaching out to everybody, so sending out a general, after somebody's purchased, are you happy to review us? can work, but it is also a risky play as well. And you know, with a lot of the review sites, you know, if it's on Google, if it's on any of the social platforms, once those reviews are up, they're up, right? So, you know, not necessarily stopping people from reviewing, but try to find out where those high NPS customers are and where your happy customers are, and then using that to gain your earned media, and using that for fuel, really, for your paid media side. You know, not every patient's going to be a fit for every doctor, so you know, not every customer is going to be happy, but you know, we all find our family doctor at some point in our life, and someone that we, you know, extremely happy with. And you know, being able to find those customers are extremely important, and you know, being able to use those customers to then increase the amount of fuel that goes into your funnel as well. And you know, there's, no matter what a business can say to you, there's never going to be as much trust as if, you know, Brandon or Vince had to recommend, you know, a product to me. I'm always going to trust them a lot more. Somebody that, you know, even if I don't know them personally, I'm going to trust them a lot more than what I am any business. So, you know, being able to find those customers can be an extremely big boost. And you know, it's very easy to activate those customers as well. You've done all the hard work already upfront. You've delivered great service. You've managed to convert them. Now it's just using them to help fuel that journey going forward.
Just to quickly add to that, Mark, I think what's important when you talk to, you know, in our world, customer experience group, you know, we've got nearly 1,000 people, and how do you manage all of this and orchestrate? And we spoke about it in terms of the empathy and orchestration, etc. You know, for us, quality is key, and how do you manage that? So often, like, we've got feedback loops. You know, you spoke of NPS, CSAT, you know, the debate rages on. Simple reality on it is that where we're seeing customer satisfaction that's dropping for whatever reason, those quality loops are important in terms of managing engagements and agents. And interestingly enough, where does AI fuse into it? You know, today you kind of get, you know, what we refer to as speech to text. You know, all conversations are transcript. You know, there's a full transcript that tells you the sentiment. You know, you kind of know exactly where you stand. In addition to that, you know, part of what you drive is across those channels, because, you know, whether it's a WhatsApp engagement or whether it's whatever the case may be, those feedback loops are important. CSAT is important for us as an example, because once you've done with an interaction, as part of that, right at the end of the funnel, something happened and you've rescued it, you've won back, you then see kind of what we refer to as that immediate rating. How did we do? How do you think we did? And often or not, if you've done the job well, you get a really great CSAT rating. And you know, we talk about, you know, 5 stars, etc. The other side of that is those, you know, understanding that you know, when you're managing with intent, particularly advocacy, you need to make sure that you find the right balance. And often or not, we, from a CXG perspective, drive an on-demand workforce. So what does that mean? It means that we balance to make sure we've got the right set of people, because that adds to that all of the elements, right? When I speak to that organization, were they responsive? Now, if your demand isn't managed from a workforce point of view that scales, you know, simple reality is that you're going to find a very difficult position, because customers are going to be engaging with you, whether it's a purchase, whether it's an offer, whether it's a promo, or it's a win back. So, you know, again, training agents using that live data is essential. You know, it's one of the practices we do in real time, where you kind of go, huh, I see there's a very interesting set of sentiment that's happening right now. Let me jump in. Let's help. Let's support that particular engagement.
So let's talk a little bit about loyalty, right? And how it's called a pre-LLM, which feels like there wasn't AI before LLMs, right? But there was actually. There's a lot of machine learning work. So, you know, there's this old adage that it's much easier to keep a customer than to gain one, right? And it's pretty much been proven time and time again. But one of the best case studies that I've seen is how, like, Starbucks had this thing called Deep Brew, where the team got super frustrated with just sending out these generic messages to the loyalty club all the time. And so they built up this thing that really, like, went quite deep on behavioral segmentation, and then started sending out very personalized messages. And the results that they got, like, they improved retention massively. The people that were seeing the AI-driven offers were much more responsive because the rewards felt more timely and so on. And as a result, they had a higher spend per visit. And back to that point about how do you explain this to your CFO? it's more revenue, right? Like at the end of the day, it's either more prolonged revenue and increase in CLV, or it's going to be like more people through the front of the funnel purchasing. And so I think, yeah, I mean, we've covered the whole journey now, right? So let's just have a look at what's next from a executive point of view.
Yep. So just the strategic outlook.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we've seen time and time again is that the best brands are moving quickly. They're learning faster. They're aligning the AI adoption with their brand DNA, which is easier said than done. Requires quite a lot of experimentation and sort of build, measure, learn cycles. But if you're not doing it, then your competitors are probably doing it. And so, generally speaking, like the advice would be like, get your foot in the door, start doing it. Don't necessarily throw the kitchen sink at it, but start building the learnings quite quickly.
Yep. And I think, on that as well, there's some of the common barriers to entry that we've seen, some of our clients where we've introduced AI tools is, the lack of data foundation or a unified data foundation. And in order to implement a lot of the stuff we've spoken about, you need to be able to pull data from all the different sides, from the marketing teams, from your dev teams, all the way down to your sales team. So that often can become a bit of a barrier to entry. And, as a starting point, making sure that I think we've spoken about quite a bit is being able to understand that customer from the first time they touch your brand till 5 years down the line when they re-engage your brand again from there. And then a fear of automation replacing creativity. We've heard this time and time again. I think a lot of people have also spoken about, or we've heard, saying that AI is going to replace a lot of creative jobs. AI can do a lot what creatives can do, but that's not quite the case. Maybe it will be in the next 10 years, but it's not quite there at the moment. And like we saw with the jungle oats, it's not replacing creativity. It's actually amplifying the creativity, which is, what we love about it, because it can take a lot of that legwork out of what the marketing teams or the creative teams and possibly the sales teams need to do, and then open up a lot more time for creativity for those teams as well. So, the campaigns that you're pushing out are a lot more well thought through. They're addressing a lot more emotion within that campaign. They're understanding the hurdles the customers are facing, because we can do a lot more research into it, and you're not worried about all the legwork that's going to be coming after that to meet your deadlines. And then lastly, just overwhelmed by tool overload. We've seen thousands of ads every day about new AI tools and different tools and this tool and that tool. But, it's just understanding within your journey where you need those tools to amplify certain bits. So, for us, it was the time to market was a big constraint for us, and it was removing a lot of creativity. So finding tools that can take a lot of that legwork out, or, as Brandon said, we'd have to do 1.5 million calls, what tools can help us automate that, and looking at parts within your journey and understanding what tools can fit in there, and then it helps break it down into something that's very specific that you're looking for, and then making sure that can integrate with whatever tool stack you're currently using, or wherever your data is sitting currently. So not just getting tools for the sake of getting tools, but getting tools for a very specific purpose to amplify what your teams are currently doing, and removing a lot of legwork from them, so they can be more creative or show more empathy or spend more time with clients or whatever it might be.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about framework, right? And how, what's the recipe here? It's different for every organization, but I think in general, you need to get a couple of things right. So firstly, measurement is key. And as you mentioned, Mike, like your base data is so important. That's always like the biggest sort of barrier to entry in the beginning. And if you're not measuring where you're at now, then you generally can't really tell very easily whether the experiments that you're running are doing well. And then obviously rapid testing loops, experimentation, not being afraid to fail, all of these things are really, really important. And if your company already has an agile culture, then it's entirely possible that that's like already in place. And then what this does is it just makes those testing loops faster. But the other thing then is, when you're testing, like you now have the opportunity to start doing like almost user level outcomes because of the speed of work, the kind of work rate that AI is going to give you. So you get to go a lot deeper, and then obviously learning, right? You'd be surprised how many organizations, when they finish an experiment, just don't do anything after that. Like the experiment's done. Okay, cool. What else are we going to do? And there's no iteration, right? And there's like the hardest thing is to take those learnings and then kind of spread them inside of the organization so that other teams and other departments don't have to go through the same process. So, like I said, it's majority actually a people thing, getting this right. And so a good leadership culture that focuses on these 4 things, I think, can really succeed very well. And then practically CX management is going to be impacted, right, B?
That's 100%. So, I mean, when you look at it from a C-suite perspective, it's not just only the right demand, but it's the right time. And I think when you talk to on demand, when you're managing scale, I think there's key considerations that you must manage from an AI perspective. So, do you have the right platform to scale? Is the first. The second is, do you have the right demand in terms of the right supply to meet the demand, whether that be a blended approach with a digital agent and or human. And the simple reality here is that you want to always try and find that balance in terms of cost or cost control. The reality is we see today, one of the largest ISPs in South Africa, their approach is fundamentally based on demand. They work with at the chat channel, first 7 days of the month, there's 110 agents that are kind of very focused on resolving those and then moving into a different sort of demand cycle. So again, it's what you call matching response. During those first 7 days, there's a high set of emotion. Things didn't happen from a financial point of view. Like there's a ton of stuff, and it's not about the queue volume, it's about managing those engagements. So it's right size demanding to make sure that you're delivering the CX that your brand also is promising. And then I guess, how do you know when you're scaling, is it working? Is it not working? And I think that's the metric side.
Yeah.
Mike,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very easy to scale up and down. To implement solutions, but being able to show the cause and effect, and like you said, Vince, as well, with the learnings that come out of it. What did we do, and what was the effect that actually came out of it? And with, I think, 9 out of 10 clients, maybe 8 out of 10 clients that we work with, they don't really have uniform dashboards that they work with either. So, bringing all that data into a single place that's actually usable, with the ads platforms or analytics accounts or, sort of whatever reporting thing you're using, trying to pull out usable metrics from spreadsheets and, a ton of different metrics within the ads platforms themselves, it's very difficult to understand what's going on in there. Maybe someone that's been doing it for 50 years can fill out those metrics, but for most of the team, metrics, they're just going to look good on a dashboard. You saw 100,000 impressions. Yeah, that looks great. Let's carry on. That's obviously working. But bringing that all into a single place that you can see every campaign that you've run, you can see how those campaigns affected landing pages, how the landing pages affected the carts, how do the salespeople affect the upsells or the lifetime value of customers in a simple way that's actually usable, makes a huge difference. And seeing those dashboards in that way, you can often start to see that cause and effect that happens and start making iterations a lot faster, where a lot of those things would have gone missed within massive spreadsheets that you're having a look at. So with the dashboards as well, it's then also easy to bring the goals together from, the brand itself, from CX, from products, from ops, from marketing, from everybody. All the goals can be pulled into a single place. Everybody can understand what the goal is they're working towards and actually have usable data to have a look at what's happening within that funnel and see if there are any bottlenecks, if there are any breaks, if, things aren't quite working. And that goes, back to the point that we're looking at, we were talking about earlier, where then you're able to find, an AI platform or whatever platform it is that can solve that problem that you found within the funnel. And yeah, I think that's most of it. I'm going to hand over to Vince just for our final takeaways before we jump off.
Yeah, we're close to the end now. So I think just some final takeaways, right? We believe very, very strongly that orchestration beats optimization in terms of impact. Obviously, optimization is really important. You can do a lot with it. But when you get to a stage where you're connecting dots in a way that doesn't require a lot of human intervention, you start getting a higher tier set of gains there. We've said a lot of times, but AI is just a tool. It's not really the destination. Anybody who spent some time vibe coding will realize that, like AI is definitely nowhere near able to do like a complex job in its entirety. And so it's really about humans with skills using AI to augment their capabilities. And back to the orchestration point, when you're thinking about tooling, best in class doesn't necessarily just shouldn't focus on being like clever tools, but rather like connected, so that you're not in a situation where your systems are not talking to each other and kind of recreating your organizational silos, but now in the tools. So yeah, and then just a couple of reflection points from Brandon.
Thanks, Vince. I think in closing for me, when you look at your tools and platforms, Vince, similarly, it's about an integrated, connected experience. So you have to ask yourself, are those tools aligned with that with your customer experience? Do they support the journeys you're looking for? We in our world have seen a number of transformations take place by using the right platform, by using the right tools that are supportive of that customer experience and journey. The second part is your tool and is your team empowered to real-time engage signals? What's happening right now? What is the pulse right now? We often talk about the pulse inside of the customer experiences that we manage, because it's about what you do now that has an impact in terms of those customer experiences. Also, the other part for me is, are you brand building or buying attention? And I think the key and the summary, just the takeaway in closing from us is, make certain that you've got the right partner with you when you're managing the customer experience. Bottom part of the funnel, also partly part of the top, because it's a pivotal piece of tech. It's a pivotal piece of work that takes place to make sure that you're acting across those journeys. And we've got a number of wonderful partners that really kind of go very deep into that customer experience and say, how do we improve those across the experience, real-time engagement and brand building? I think that's it in closing. Huh?
Yep. That's pretty much it from our side. So I think we can open up the floor as well to, if there are any questions, hopefully we'll be able to give you some answers from our side. Vince, you are on mute, but Vince and Brandon, I'm presenting, so you might just have to have a look through the comment sections there.
I was just saying that the team were also kind enough to push our email addresses out on the chat. So anyone who's got any questions like later.
Amazing.
We haven't really covered tools, right? And we tend not to talk about those things in things like this, because 90% of the solution is like strategy and change management and so on, right? But like we spend our lives deep in the tools. So there's also that side of it that we can talk about for days. We just can't fit it in, obviously, into a 90-minute webinar.
An hour webinar that ended up in 90 minutes.
It's our version of a 60 minutes. It's 90 minutes.
Okay, cool. Well, I think, guys, on that note, we're just going to wrap up, and then, just reach out to us. We'll be having more of these where we go more in depth. So, follow us on LinkedIn, and just really good to have everyone on the webinar.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Mike.
Cool.
Vince.
Cheers. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Cheers.